The Right Hook, sponsored by VHI Healthcare, Ireland's #1.
Atheism isn't exactly something new, but it does probably, it's fair to say, in the recent past have some pretty high-profile believers, if that's a word you can use in relation to atheism. We've a bit of a debate about it because my guest, Dr. Robert Grant, who is a tutor in philosophy at Trinity College Dublin, believes the new atheists are dangerous, and no doubt to defend the new atheists. In the studio with me is the chairman of Atheist Ireland, Michael Nugent. Michael, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
So what I thought we might do, Michael, is go on the telephone to Trinity College, Dr. Grant. And Dr. Grant, good afternoon. Welcome to the programme.
Hi, how you doing, George? Thanks for having me.
Tell me about these new atheists. I thought atheists were atheists. I didn't know there were new ones and old ones.
Well, basically, in the wake of 9/11, there was a kind of an increase in the popularity of these new atheists. Mainly, I'm talking about Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and they had a couple of really best-selling books around the world, and they were very popular. And I suppose I kind of wrote the article in the Times today because while I was sympathetic to a lot of their criticisms of religion and organised religion, and, you know, some of the beliefs of miracles and prayer and stuff, I had a problem with their tone and their style, and I thought they neglected to really get at the core interesting issue when we talk about religion. They seem to just stop short and say, you know, religious people are irrational and silly and they should change their minds. But I mean, the real interesting question is why people are still religious. What is it about human nature that gives rise to these beliefs and leads people to subscribe to this kind of system of belief?
All right. Well, Michael, like you, an atheist is a believer, like he believes in not believing, as it were. So, did you take issue with Dr. Grant, and in what sort of particular areas?
Well, first of all, what you're saying now, Robert, is slightly different to what you were saying in the article. What you were saying in the article is that Richard and Sam and Christopher Hitchens have said that if you get rid of religion, that you get rid of evil. And that's, of course, not true. None of them has ever said that. And you also left out Daniel Donnett, who is arguably the most sophisticated of the four main new atheists.
I certainly think it's fair to say that, for example, they have kind of put the blame for terrorism and a lot of conflicts, say, in Northern Ireland and Israel and Palestine, squarely on the shoulders of religion. And I think this is a mistake because they treat religion in isolation and they neglect to talk about what gives rise to these conflicts politically, economically, socially, historically, and these are the real interesting questions. You know, what kind of situation gives rise to religious fundamentalism? Just simply saying that it's irrational and silly and they should change their mind is not helpful. I think it's divisive and it kind of fosters us versus them.
So you're withdrawing your suggestion then that they have said that if you get rid of religion, that you get rid of evil. You're no longer saying that. Is that true?
I mean, I think that's a kind of a general implication of what they're saying, that they
but
don't
it isn't. Tell me one place where they've said that. So you are saying that. I'm confused about what you're saying because you seem to be withdrawing that.
Okay, right. So you're just going to talk about whether I actually said this thing or not.
Yes, because it's a significant thing to say. If you accuse people of saying something that they didn't say, I mean, all of those people have said that morality is a product of evolution, that it arises from things like empathy and cooperation and reciprocity and sense of fairness and justice, which are evolutionary products of our brains because we're social animals. And the argument is not that if you get rid of religion that you'll get rid of evil. It's that when you're trying to make moral decisions based on those human tendencies, that religion corrupts the process of making moral decisions.
No, hold a while there. Hold a while. Dr. Grant, I think this is an important point that Michael has just made. And, Michael, I'd like you to repeat it, lest I, in paraphrasing it, don't say it right. You said that religion corrupts decisions to do what? What did you say?
It corrupts morality. Because morality is essentially about how we treat other sentient beings. Are we kind? Are we inflicting unnecessary suffering? Are we helping to maximise well-being? Now, it's a very difficult thing to decide what the best thing to do is because there are so many interrelating factors. But what religion does is it corrupts that already difficult... I'll just want to explain why, because this is significant. It corrupts that already difficult process by adding in arbitrary commands from imaginary beings that are unrelated to empathy or cooperation or reciprocity. Well, and if you take, for example, in the Quran, there's a specific thing in the Quran that's significant about this. In the Quran, where they're saying that you have to flog people for adultery, it specifically says, do not let your sympathy and empathy with them override your instructions.
Right. I don't disagree whatsoever with what you're saying about morality and how religion can corrupt this. What I'm saying is that the interesting question is that why is religion still so popular in the world today? What is it about our natures that allows certain people in certain circumstances to still subscribe to what you describe as irrational and silly beliefs? And I think the interesting question there is that there's issues about the ability to live a flourishing human life. There's political, social, economic issues of oppression, of foreign occupation, of poverty, of inequality, and these are the issues that give rise to this thing. And religious extremism is just one example, one manifestation of a complex web of interrelated issues, and I think the new atheists try and pin down all of these onto just religion.
No, they don't, Helen. You're saying that again, but it's not true.
Just for a minute here. Just for a minute. I thought it was going to get a debate. It sounds to me like you're an atheist as well, Robert, are you?
I would probably consider myself an agnostic.
Hold on while you're there.
But I'm certainly not an apologist for religion.
All right,
but my criticism is the danger in assuming that if we kind of just deal with religion, there's all these other problems behind the door.
But nobody's disagreeing with that. You're inventing that.
I am. I'm disagreeing. It seems the only apologist for religion here is me. Listen, lads, Dr. Robert Grant and Michael Nugent of Atheist Ireland, can I talk about this corrupt thing? Like, how does religion corrupt morality? Can both of you, because after all, Robert, you are choosing philosophy, so you ought to be able to tell us about this. How does Robert Grant in Trinity, how does religion corrupt morality? How does my belief in a superior being with a long white beard and a flaming chariot and 7 angels and all that stuff, how does that corrupt my moral focus?
I don't think it necessarily corrupts morality. I think there are people out there who are believers who live extremely moral lives. I know them. I think there's loads of people who have treated other people with respect, have been charitable, have been kind, and still been believers. I think this is part of the problem with the new atheists. I think, yes, there are situations where the power of the church can influence people to follow dogmatic rules that are insane and silly and hurt people, but I don't think it's necessarily the cause of belief. I think there's other issues.
I get it. Michael, are you suggesting, like, when you say corrupt morality, like this thing about the Quran, for instance, right, and adultery, are you married, are you?
No, I'm not.
All right, well, I am, and like Mrs. Hook would certainly follow the Quran if I committed adultery. I mean, she'd believe that I should get 40 lashes. I mean, there's a price to be paid for adultery. Now, you don't get 40 lashes, but you finish up in court and you pay alimony and so on. Like, so all we're talking about is what is the price for adultery, isn't it?
Well, I think that's a very good point, actually, because I think what people do is they pick and choose the elements of the Bible or the Quran that suit their already existing values. The idea that if we just kind of squash down the Quran or the Bible, that suddenly people will start behaving well and start.
Yes, but nobody is saying that. Hang on, you keep saying that, but nobody is saying that.
Michael, you're saying it corrupts morality.
You've made it your cause. You've chosen religion as your focal point for how we can progress as a species.
No, I haven't. Let me explain what I'm saying. Let me explain. The problem is not religion. The problem is faith and dogma. And by faith, I mean believing things disproportionate to the evidence, and by dogma, I mean believing things without questioning them. Now, faith and dogma can be used to support religious views. They can also be used to support secular views. They can be used to support fascism. They can be used to support communism. They can be used to support the unregulated free market. And all of those are problems. So you run into problems in all of those. Where religion has a particular corrupting effect is, first of all, it claims to have the authority of the creator of the universe, which creates a far stronger impetus for people to believe it. Yeah. And secondly, unlike secular faiths and dogmas, which eventually bump into reality and you notice that they're not working, religion hides its testability in an imaginary afterlife, and therefore it never gets the reality check in people's minds that causes them to realise, actually, this is wrong.
You're going to feel a bit teed off, Michael, if when you depart this earthly coil, you finish up playing the banjo on a cloud and are happy as a sandboy. I mean, neither of us know with any certainty, the three of us, whether or not there is an afterlife, because nobody can prove it. Isn't that right? I mean, you happen to believe one thing.
Well, we know enough from science to assume that given that there are centuries of previous religious explanations for reality being overtaken by scientific explanations, nothing moving in the opposite direction. Every generation we find out more and more and more about how the universe operates naturally. So it's safe to assume that on the big issues, such as afterlife, such as the nature of consciousness, such as what happened before the Big Bang, such as how life began, it's safe to assume that when we do find out, if we do find out, the answer to this, that it will be a natural explanation and not a supernatural one.
But I don't disagree with a lot of that, but the flip side of you saying that the problem is faith and dogma, the implication there is that somehow if we follow science and evidence that we will live better lives. And I think this is another...
No, so again, you're just making things up. No, you're making things up again. You're continually saying things that just don't follow from what I say. That's not the implication of what I say. I've already explained what the implication of what I said is that reason and faith help us. They're more reliable ways of understanding reality, not morality. They're more reliable ways of understanding reality than our faith.
But they're no better guide to how you should live your life.
Of course they are. Of course they are. They contribute to a better guide because it is better to have a more reliable understanding of reality when you are taking moral decisions.
There's countless examples throughout history of people who rely on evidence and science, who treat people terribly, who have massive organisations of bureaucratic oppression and degradation, and yet they don't have any faith or dogma. I think
they do have faith and dogma. Who are you talking about? Because I would suggest that whoever you're talking about are operating on the basis of faith and dogma.
Oh, for example, after the French Revolution, you had based on Enlightenment values of reason and of evidence and of science, you had the Jacobean Reign of Terror, where they executed 17,000 people because they didn't agree with their beliefs.
Yeah, well, that's clearly based on dogma. If you're murdering people based on your beliefs, that's clearly based on dogma. How could it be otherwise?
But you're claiming that if we get rid of any kind of element of faith, that we will somehow...
No, you're claiming that I'm claiming that, and you're doing that repeatedly, but I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that faith corrupts it. I'm not saying that it's the only corruption, and I'm not saying that...
Sorry, Robert. Robert, I want to ask Michael a question, because it seems as I'm the defender of the faith here. They might actually have a coin for me eventually with defender of the faith on it. But Michael, if we look at, say, 10 Commandments, right?
Yeah. Horrible set of judgments.
Oh, Michael. But you don't essentially have a problem with honour your father and your mother, don't tell porky pies, don't murder somebody, all that kind of good stuff. You don't have a problem with that.
Of course, I don't have any problem with the good stuff.
So how does that corrupt morality?
Because it also includes things like stoning people to death for gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Yes, the 10 Commandments. If you look at the 10 Commandments, which are arbitrarily chosen out of a list of hundreds of commands in the Old Testament, they command that you stone a woman to death for not being a virgin on her wedding night. They command that you stone a man to death for gathering sticks on the Sabbath. The 10 Commandments are not a guide for morality. The 10 Commandments are a guide for the stability of one
But you can't.
tribe. And what they say now, this is a very significant point, George. It's a very significant point. The whole essence of the Old Testament is immoral. The whole story is this: God says to one tribe, if you obey my rules, I'll help you kill those people over there and take their land. The whole essence of the story is immoral.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I don't believe that there was a man and a woman in a garden and a talking snake. I don't believe that stuff, all right? But the difficulty is, Robert, I think, that when we talk about religion, for 30 years there was savagery committed on this very island in the name of religion, Catholic versus Protestant. Literally, as we speak, 60 miles from Baghdad, on the grounds of religion, we have jihadists, and God knows what they're doing.
But I think that kind of explanation fails to do justice to the real causes of those problems. And if you look at what's going on in the Middle East, the real causes for fundamentalism and terrorism, while they're wrapped up in religious garb, are often foreign occupation, political oppression, brutal dictators, poverty. These are the things that leave people hopeless. They leave them despairing, and they leave them susceptible to turn to the religious kind of comfort that you can get. And that's what we need to talk about. What is it about human nature that when these things are robbed from us, that we turn to such things instead of just saying, this is stupid, the Bible said this and it's wrong, this is silly, this is irrational, we should get rid of it.
All right,
we need
Michael,
to talk about why.
Yeah, Michael, it's an interesting point he makes. If we go back to Northern Ireland for a minute, I can remember your man, he stood for Fine Gael in a presidential election from Northern Ireland. But remember... Austin Curry, thank you. Austin Curry went into a house and locked himself in because the government of 6 counties was giving it to a single woman, a Protestant, and not giving it to a family of 5 or 6 Catholics, right? So isn't Robert Grant's point really correct that the reason for the dispute was not so much Catholic versus Protestant, but the basic inequality involved? So doesn't he have a kind of point there?
Well, there is significant social research that shows consistently that as countries and societies move away from traditional religious values and towards secular rational values, which is triggered by things like evolution towards democracy, investment in health, education, communications, technology, that those societies become more tolerant, more pluralist, less sexist, less racist, less homophobic, have less serious crime issues, have less teenage pregnancies, have less abortions, have less homicides.
Have before the horse there could be a causal correlation of the standard of life for people and the ability to live a flourishing human life. Then that's when religious fundamentalism, religious belief falls off.
I agree with that. Yes, I agree with that. Yeah,
what
true.
Country, is there one, just to get me right here, one country where all these magic things have happened, like no teenagers get pregnant and all this?
I think the closest are the Scandinavian countries.
And they're not. There's nobody believe in God in Scandinavia.
Very few. They're the most secular countries, and they have the best social indicators in a wide range of aspects.
But that actually goes further to prove my point. I mean, I agree with you, Michael, when you say that. And I think this is what we need to talk about. Instead of just focusing on the silly things in the Old Testament, we should focus on what are the economic, social, political situations that give rise to this.
Yeah, but we are doing that. I am doing that. I am doing that. But what you're doing is you're creating imaginary straw men atheists that are no more real than the God that religious people
really
believe
don't think so. And I really don't. I think that the angry tone, the dismissive tone, the intolerant tone of a lot of atheism, which I think is just a fair thing to say, I think that leads people to stop the conversation short.
Well, I would say that your article is far more intolerant than anything I've read from Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, but hold on now.
That really surprising.
No, hang on a minute here.
Well, read it again. Read your own article again. You're making up claims and attributing to people that aren't true, and then on the basis of that, you're drawing implications that don't even follow from the inaccurate claims.
Michael, hold on a minute there, down in Trinity College. Michael, where do you put me, in your great scheme of things, a believer like me? So where do I go? Am I corrupting morality, or where do you kind of see me in the great... If you could get Ireland to Scandinavia, what would happen with fellas like me? Would there be a kind of a ghetto in which you would put us all into?
No, I think you seem like a decent person. I think you seem like a moral person, apart from your kind of strange views on stoning for adultery. You seem reasonable enough. And I think that
my wife has the view about stoning for adultery.
Okay, well then your strange choice of marital spouse then. But it's look, everybody should have the right to believe whatever they want to believe in, and the new atheists are certainly not trying to outlaw religious belief. What we're saying is, first of all, individuals should try to apply reason and empathy and compassion when making moral decisions. And secondly, and this is the most important bit, that the state should respect equally everybody's religious or non-religious views by remaining neutral. It's when religion starts to enshrine its beliefs in the laws of the land that you start causing problems.
Well, I absolutely agree with the separation of church and state and institutions and organised religion and stuff like that. My problem, and I think you're probably being a bit harsh on me in terms of questioning whether I'm creating this straw man. I think it's very fair to say that Dawkins and Harris and Hitchens have been dismissive of religious people. They've called them irrational. They said that it's backwards, that it's, all these things. That's not a big leap to claim this, and I think that
it's a big leap because they have all denied it. They have all denied it.
Sorry.
All I'm trying to say is this is stultifying the discussion. It stops the conversation from going a little bit deeper, a little bit further to some real issues. That's all.
Right, Michael Nugent, you're chairman of Atheist Ireland. Is it not fair that Dawkins and co right, and Hitchens and so on, they certainly use inflammatory language. Can I say that?
They use robust language.
All right,
but it's no more robust. It's no more robust than you would use on your programme, George. And yet I presume you wouldn't consider yourself to be...
believer.
Yes, and I assume you wouldn't consider yourself to be dangerous and naive.
Is it not possible that robust or inflammatory language might be somewhat damaging to the conversation that we could potentially have? That's all.
Of course it would, but I mean, it's the robust language in your article that's brought us here today.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the issues for a second. Like, if you look back to the great atheists of the 19th century, Marx and Nietzsche, they too said a lot of the same things as the new atheists. They criticized religion and they were fierce in their criticism, but they didn't stop there and just say we should get rid of it or we should, it's irrational. So they tried to understand what were the conditions that gave rise to it. And Marx had his economic explanation, Nietzsche had his human nature and power relationships. All I'm calling for is to take the conversation a little bit further and understand why. What are the causes behind it?
Well, we can take it. I agree with you about that. I agree with you about that, and we can take it considerably further than Nietzsche, because to paraphrase Nietzsche is dead. And if we if we move on today, what we are finding today is that science, while it doesn't answer moral questions, science and reason are giving us increasingly useful evidence on which to base moral decisions.
Why?
Absolutely, but we need to be careful too. We need to be careful not to just assume that the more science we have, the more reason we have, that everything will suddenly get better.
Okay,
yeah, but nobody's saying that. You keep saying that other people are saying, but nobody, you're imagining that.
I think our whole culture has this kind of tendency to champion the scientific and the technological, as if the more advances we make, like it could race out of our control. I just think we need to have more caution about the inherent corruptibility of human nature. That's all. Just some.
But Michael, you're kind of saying, like, to me, in a way, aren't you, like that I'm a bit of a dope, like, because if I were rational and technologically sound and a whole pile of other things,
but you're able to run a radio programme. You must have some technological ability.
No, but you know what I mean. You are actually
George to say that if you can't quote him on it. You should probably pick him up on that point.
No, but aren't you? You're kind of saying that because I believe in this, that essentially...
Well, what do you believe in? Tell me what you do, because I doubt very. You seem too intelligent to believe in some of the things that some religious people believe.
That's exactly the type of language that I have a problem with.
Yeah,
well, you shouldn't have. If I was saying the same thing about politics, you wouldn't consider it unusual.
No, but you've just said, Michael, in essence, you've just said, I can't possibly be
George, do you believe...
No, you said, I can't possibly be intelligent because I believe this stuff.
No, I said the exact opposite. I don't think you heard what I said. I think that you're too intelligent to believe some of the things that some religious people believe.
All right, so what do I believe in?
Well, I can't tell you what you believe in, but I'll ask you a question. Okay, do you believe that the entire universe was created, 100 billion galaxies, each of which is 100 billion stars like our sun? Do you believe it was all created for the benefit of human beings on planet Earth?
Basically, if you push me, and you are, yes.
You do, and do you think that was an efficient way for the creator of the universe to create a tiny planet for one species?
I think efficiency is one of his values.
There's something unexplainable to me how this whole thing happened, and the only way I can explain this inability to explain is a superior being.
Well, here's another way. Just say I don't know. Why do you have to invent an explanation for the bits that you don't know?
I'm telling you what I believe. I also believe that 5 points for a try is a good idea. I believe that Ronan O'Gara is the greatest fly half since 1950. I mean, you have beliefs, and those beliefs empower the way you live. I also have, and I must say, this is not too scientific, and you probably never come back on the programme again, but I have this real hope that my parents are in heaven in order that I can meet them and tell them I'm really sorry for the way I treated them and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, there's no rational thing for that, which obviously for you, like, is, your man's for the big house on the hill. But I
understand that, George, and can I put that in personal perspective? Like, my wife died 3 years ago.
Didn't know that.
And I would have the same desire, obviously, if I thought that it was possible to meet my wife again. That's a very human, emotional desire. Yeah. Now, but What I'm doing, though, is in my own ways, I'm following the evidence and concluding that I don't think it's going to happen.
Yes.
That's not to say that I wouldn't like it to happen.
All right, but also, like, my grandsons, if I say to them, lads, honour thy father and thy mother, don't tell lies, all that kind of... That is, and when St. Paul says, and I've said this a million times, greater love than this no man hath, that he give his life for his friend, and so on, I believe that's not a bad way to live your life.
Not, and there are lots of good moral commands in the Bible and in the Quran, and love thy neighbour as thyself, and the story of the Good Samaritan, and equally in the Quran. But in the same, what I'm saying, George, this is significant.
Hold on.
What I'm saying, George, this is significant. In the same book, there are morally bad commands. Now, however religious people justify the morally bad commands, it's a metaphor, it's for one people at one time, however they justify them, the very fact that you notice the distinction between love thy neighbour as thyself, which you automatically know is right, and the other ones that you have to twist around, that shows that you, George Hook, are applying your own morality to that book. You're not getting your morality from it.
All right, okay. But listen, I can tell you, as a good Cork fella, imagine if we could divide the Liffey every time we wanted to cross over and weren't dependent on Jack Lynch Tunnel. How good that would be. If we could bring Moses back to solve the flood problem in Cork.
It's certainly the strongest argument we've had so far for the existence of a God.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. By telephone, Dr. Robert Grant, tutor of philosophy in Trinity College Dublin, and the chairperson of Atheist Ireland, Michael Nugent. Thank you so much to both.
The Right Hook, sponsored by VHI Healthcare, Ireland's #1.